Do you all have a sense of what a delight it is for me to work with this incredible staff? It is so great. They are so great on their own, and they are great when they cover for my blunders too. Did you notice last Sunday when I jumped up to read the scripture completely out of place and everybody just covered for me? It was just great. Today, however, I think I was right on my mark, and I want some affirmation for that, please. Today is the final Sunday of our stewardship season, the last of our 4 sermons on giving, and I really wish you didn't look that happy about it. If needed, we can continue till Advent if the pledges didn't come in as we need them to. But we do finalize today our focus on giving and generosity. What is it with Jesus and dinner parties? Did you notice this? Last week, in last week's sermon, Jesus was the guest, special guest, at a dinner party given by a prominent Pharisee. And all the in crowd was in attendance, and everybody's trying to get a glimpse at the miracle worker. Well, today's story is different. Jesus is at a dinner party again, but this is not a gussied up gala. This is a relaxed evening with friends. This is a let's order pizza kind of night. But Jesus is away from home. He's not up in the Galilee region. He's in Bethany, not quite 2 miles from Jerusalem. And John tells us that it's 6 days before Passover. And John's gospel has made a turning point here. There are no more dialogues and discussions. There are no more signs and wonders. We are in the final act of God's great redemptive drama. Only 2 miles and 6 days separate us from the triumphal entry into Jerusalem. And Jesus and his friends know, as they sit around the house having dinner together, that the trip into Jerusalem means facing potentially lethal opposition. We also know a thing or two about others who are at the dinner party. Lazarus, of course, is a friend of Jesus, the one he raised from the dead. Martha, we've seen other glimpses of her. She's the busy in the kitchen, hoping the timers all go off at the same time, detail-oriented, ultimate hostess. And Mary is her impulsive and lovable sister. She's the one where you just look and roll your eyes and say, here she goes again. And on this occasion, while Martha is up and scurrying and doing her thing, and can I get you some more tea and all of that, Mary excuses herself, comes back with a costly perfume, a pound of pure nard. It would cost about a year's wage. Imagine that, a year's salary worth of smell good. Sermon work sometimes leads to weird internet searches. But according to successstory.com, Clive Christian #1 Imperial Majesty perfume sells for $12,722 an ounce. And it is the second most expensive on the list. There are a lot of French names on the list that I can't pronounce, so I went with the second most expensive. So 4 ounces of that stuff, and you've blown through more money than most Atlantans earn in a year. And that's what Mary did. She came to Jesus, spilled 40 grand worth of perfume on his feet, and then rubbed it in using her long hair. This really loving, intimate act. And the whole room, overwhelmed by the aroma of this much nard, the whole room overwhelmed by the size of this loving act, and nobody there ever forgot the adoration they witnessed that night. They didn't all have the same reaction, but they never forgot it. Matthew, Mark, John all tell the same story. Now, I said not everybody reacted the same to this lavish act. Judas was certainly not a fan. Now, keep in mind, when John writes this, he's writing after he knows a thing or two about the character of Judas, and he basically calls him out as an uncaring thief who really cares about money and not poor people. Obviously, John shows no love for Judas. But on the face of it, his practical concerns should be taken seriously. Why was this perfume not sold and money given to the poor? That's a good practical question. What is all this extravagance when we could do some good here? Well, there are two legitimate lines of thought here as it relates to prudence and extravagance. You know that years ago, cathedrals were built with this grand opulence, outrageously high ceilings and gold overlay and ivory carvings and all of that. Michelangelo hanging upside down to paint the Sistine Chapel. Everything's detailed and beautiful and magnificent. Spare no expense, they would say, because we're building these cathedrals to the glory of God. But most churches today, they don't go in for that. A Butler building that used to be a skating rink would be fine. A former Big Lots with a bunch of folding chairs, that'd be good. Oh, why spend money on carvings and pretties when there's so much pain in the world? We've touched on it already today. Thursday of this week, Kiva Case from Buckhead Christian Ministries sent me and others the list of the names of the 60 Atlantans who died homeless this year. I understand the case Judas is trying to make. Why would you pour out 40 grand in perfume? Why would you pay Michelangelo? Let's slap up some Sherman Williams. There's work to be done. There's human hurt all around. I get it. So Judas goes off on Mary for this outrageous act, this extravagance. There are poor people all around. They could have been helped with this money. And Jesus says, leave her alone. Could you have seen that coming? Jesus doesn't side with the we should feed the poor argument. Jesus sides with Mary. What are we to make of this? What is the place for extravagance in the life of the Christian? First of all, statistically speaking, extravagance is not a huge problem for most Christians anyway. It's not like that it's just gone so rampant that we've got to get this thing under control. According to the 2018 charitable giving statistics, only 5% of Christians tithe and 80% give only 2% of their income to the church. So extravagance isn't a huge problem for the Christian community. And whatever you do, if you're looking for examples of Christian generosity, don't Google Christians and tipping for inspirational stories about extravagance. Let me give you two stories that my search ran down. The Applebee's waitress in Missouri who got this note written on the check from a pastor. I give God 10%, why do you get 18? Oh, thanks for making the pastors look good. Oh my gosh. Or the phony $10 bill that's laid on the table. Looks like a $10 bill, but when you pick it up, it's actually a Christian tract that begins, some things are better than money. Oh, please, please. as I said, Christian extravagance is not exactly rampant, but when we do see it, it does inspire other acts of generosity. I've told you this story before, but I saw a guy when I was playing golf one day who tipped $20 on a $3 Gatorade. The beverage cart came around. The woman asked what we needed, a college student, just out trying to make some extra money. He got a Gatorade. She wrote down his number. It'll show up on his bill someday later for $3. And he gave her a $20 tip on a $3 Gatorade. I see things like that, and it inspires me. I want to be more generous. Next time she came around, I got a $3 Gatorade. I gave her $5. I don't make as much money as he does, but I felt good. It made me want to be more generous. Giving inspires. Last week, I saw a friend who's retired. He has a home here, a home in the mountains. There's a new ministry that's formed in the mountains for abused women and children. And he's not only contributing to that, but he's taken responsibility for raising, I think it is, $2 million. Anyway, it's a figure higher than I can count. But he is giving money to it, raising money for it, and the more he talked about it, the more animated, the more excited he became. He said, in my retirement, it's just important for me to get up and have something to do, something that inspires me to do something that contributes to the world. I've got something to get my hands on. You can only play tennis so many times a week. I have to get something done. It inspires me. Well, evidently, this extravagance of Mary inspired others too. Because keep in mind, this is not a public miracle like feeding the 5,000. This episode happened at a small dinner gathering in a home in Bethany, and 3 of the 4 Gospels carried the news. This kind of outrageous generosity, moved by devotion, not for headlines, just uncontained adoration, unbounded gratitude, unbridled devotion, this act so pure, so filled with holy extravagance, that Jesus says, leave her alone. And the others apparently left so inspired that they retold the story over and over. Generosity does that. It inspires. I'm curious, and this is the audience participation part of the sermon today. How many people, raise your hand, how many people have ever heard of a contemporary British businessman named James Quincy? Any? James Quincy. All right, question number 2. How many of you know the name of former Atlanta businessman Robert Woodruff? Pretty much the whole room. Thank you. Mr. Woodruff was president of the Coca-Cola Company until 1954. James Quincy is the current president of the Coca-Cola Company. More of you knew the name of the guy who was president over 60 years ago than the current president. But the reason is not that you're impressed by his resume from over 60 years ago. You are inspired by his generosity. In his outrageous, lavish, ongoing contribution, the Woodruff Foundation, the Woodruff Library, the Woodruff Art Center, he poured pure nard all over the city of Atlanta, and he has inspired others to do the same. That's what giving does. It inspires. But it happens in low-profile ways, too. A young married couple, Julia Wise and Jeff Kaufman, made an early commitment that for all of their marriage, they would give away half of their income. I know, it sounds outrageous. It sounds as outrageous as pouring out 40 grand in perfume. She was a social worker. He was a computer programmer. And by the time they were 30 and 31 years old, respectively, they had donated a total of $585,000. Jeff told Today.com, "We have what we need, so it makes sense to share with people." But here's the real key to this story. They had, at the time of this article, 2 daughters, a 2-year-old, a 6-month-old, and he said, "We hope they will grow up thinking this is a normal part of life." Now, their outrageous generosity didn't inspire a whole city like Mr. Woodruff's, but they did hope to inspire their daughters to be generous. And we talk about around here in committee meetings, finance committee and budget committee and stewardship committee and the like, the need to do more stewardship education, how we need to teach the younger generation more responsibility and more about the delight of being generous. And every now and then we do. We've gone so far as to have a 4-week sermon series on. But nothing teaches generosity like Jeff Kaufman saying, "We hope they will grow up thinking this is a normal part of life." Our formal teaching about generosity is good, but when you put your offering in the plate and pass it in front of your children's faces, when you leave more than is expected for your server at lunch, that is the lesson your children will learn about generosity. Giving with delight and gratitude inspires others to give as well. Well, I know I haven't answered the original question yet. The tension I raised earlier, trying to satisfy the tension between extravagance and practicality, indulgence and prudence. Should we give extravagantly to the homeless shelter? Should we give to do touch-ups at the Sistine Chapel? I'm not sure I can settle that. But my hunch is that Jesus points at and laughs and delights in every form of generosity he sees. I suppose he would have done backflips if Judas had been inspired by that lavish act of Mary's and stepped up and said, "You know what? I'm going to give a $40,000 gift of my own to feed the poor." It's not like there's so much extravagance going on that we've got to scale this thing back. You remember the story of the widow's mite, right? The poor widow, she has a couple of coins that she puts in the receptacle where the money's to be collected to given to the poor. She's poor, she puts money in for poor people. And in spite of her small contribution, Jesus points to her and celebrates her lavish generosity. She is the hero of that story. So today in our story, the one who is the hero is the one who gave lavishly in a way that wasn't practical at all. In that story, the hero is somebody who gives lavishly of her own meager earnings to something that's incredibly practical. Jesus celebrates the lavish. We see so little lavish extravagance, so little appreciation, big giving motivated by gratitude that we just can't hold in. We see so little of it that Jesus points and delights, whether it's given to homelessness or upgrades to the Sistine Chapel. But whenever we see somebody gushing forth with gratitude and extravagance, it seems to inspire other people to do the same. You all inspire me regularly. When I come to work on Mondays and see a group of women rearranging the flowers into smaller vases to take to a hospital or to homebound members of our church. That kind of giving inspires. Last year, a woman in our congregation sent me a note saying, "I'm glad you're my pastor." And her note included a $10,000 check to the church that was over and above her regular giving. It inspires me. 2 weeks ago, when a group of you bought hamburgers, gave up a fall Saturday to go to Garden Hills just to bring delight to a group of children who needed that kind of delight. You gave up Saturday and went and bought stuff. It inspires me. Every year when I take a group in my car, we meet up with another group, and a group of our folks gather at the airport to get on a plane to go to Miami to serve the poor. And I look across, and over and above their church giving, they have bought airline tickets, they have given up a week's vacation. It inspires me again. In a small home in Bethany, 2 miles out from Jerusalem, Mary poured out about 40 grand worth of perfume as an act of worship and devotion. And we're still talking about it over 2,000 years later. Because that's what extravagant giving does. It continues to inspire. How will you respond to all of the extravagant examples around us and the extravagance given to you? Let's stand and sing and respond.